Order, order. Good afternoon. I'm Natasha Brown, the Chair of the Youth Select Committee for Curriculum for Life. Can I welcome you all to this afternoon's oral session? We're here today as a result of what young people across the country have asked us to explore, based on the views of the UK Youth Parliament, British Youth Council, among others. I'd like to ask everyone to make sure their phones are turned on silent and that no photos or videos are taken during this session, but feel free to tweet with the hashtag YouthSelect. I would now like to welcome the panel and ask them to briefly introduce themselves. We start from this end with Jamie.
Hi, I'm Jamie Brett. I'm here, I work for the Prince Trust, but I'm here in a personal capacity. A bit about my story is from 15 to 18, I was in and out of school because I used to have seizures all the time, so I could have 3 in a night, 3 times a week. So obviously I'm going to have a slightly different take on what school provides people from people that weren't always at school. From that I went on to work at Cineworld, just as an entry-level position.
You don't have to stand up.
Sorry. In an entry-level position, within 6 months I've been promoted to a projectionist. Within a year, 6 months been promoted to stock control. Within a year to a projectionist. I then took a year out to work on film and television credits, and then decided to go on a Prince Trust course because I wanted to become more employable. Found the course phenomenal. Started volunteering for the Trust as a young ambassador, and I'm now hired by the Trust as a job ambassador to go and meet young people and help get them into work as well.
Okay, thank you. And
good afternoon. I'm Andrew Taggart, and I'm the co-founder and director of a youth-led campaign group on youth unemployment called the Found Generation, as opposed to the so-called Lost Generation, which I'm sure many of you have heard about in various news reports. Our job really is we're campaigning for politicians from all 3 major political parties to take action in local government and national government to tackle youth unemployment and reduce youth unemployment. A few of those ideas on the education side we've put forward in our written evidence, and I'm happy to talk further about that or about any other ideas you want me to talk about.
thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Afsha, Munir, and I'm a customer service officer for my local council. I'm here today representing Kirklees Youth Council, and my role is a co-optee representing young people in employment.
Thank you. Rob?
Good afternoon, I'm also from the Kirklees Youth Council, and I'm Rob Morris. We've been working on things like work experience and also on the life skills.
Thank you. And
Good afternoon, I'm Matthew Otubu. I'm a member of Youth Parliament for Newcastle upon Tyne and a youth councillor for Newcastle Central. So I'm just bringing all the information we have of what we've been doing in Newcastle on our Ready for Life campaign.
okay, thank you. We'll get straight into questions and we'll start with Nathan.
Great. We've had a lot of different suggestions on what life skills is and means and what it includes. How would you suggest we define it?
Would you like to start? Yeah.
I'd say life skills is basically anything that helps someone on a day-to-day basis. When you're looking at things like employability skills, parenting skills, things that young challenges that people are faced with on a daily basis that actually help through life, is what I would define it as.
Thank you. Would you like to answer this one?
Well, my focus in responding to this committee has mainly been on life skills in relation to youth unemployment, so I haven't covered, as I'm sure you'll have seen, things like relationships education or financial education or anything like that. In the context of tackling youth unemployment, I believe life skills are skills which help prepare a young person for the world of work, whether it's through teaching them about enterprise and business or teaching them employability skills such as teamwork, character, resilience, leadership, and so on and so forth, literacy and numeracy, the ability to volunteer and play a part in your community. It's all those kind of things, but that's the kind of very specific definition which I'm focusing on rather than a wider one.
From the research that Kirklees carried out, we found that different people at different stages in their life, young people, have different ideas of what life skills are and what different life skills they'd like to gain. So we had things like domestic skills, but me personally, I'd say that life skills that are important are transferable skills like communication, but also the ability to gain an understanding of how you can identify how to actually gain life skills as well. So if that's being guided, like somebody guiding you to gaining life skills or learning through your own experiences, I think it can be done in different ways. But I'd say that life skills are skills that can help you to face challenges throughout any stage of your life.
Okay, thank you. Robert?
I think life skills are things after college or school, things that prepare you for future life, getting into the job, being independent more, because in schools you always have something to fall back on and someone to push you forward, which once you leave school, you're always on your own. There's nothing to do. If you fail in life or if you've done something wrong, it's straight to prison or straight to the law, which, that's what I think.
I think life skills they're relative, so there's no comprehensive list of what they could be. It's dependent on, geographical location or gender or race. But obviously we can say, and as everyone on the panel has said, they are indispensable traits that would aid a productive life or to be able to live in a world where you can actually function and contribute to society.
You've all briefly touched on it, but what elements do you think are most important for young people today and why?
I would go for employability skills. I think the school does not prepare you for the working world. It leaves a different kind of... If you think of the structure of a school where it's very much you don't manage your own timekeeping, it's very much led into you're tested on all your knowledge of a subject within an hour. That's not actually relative to any job that I've ever had to do, where I've had to write down everything I know within the space of an hour and then be told that that is how I'm going to be evaluated. So from my point of view, I think that... Sorry, I lost my train of thought a bit. That life skills need to be... I would focus more on employability because I think that that's what people have to deal with on a day-to-day basis.
If I had to pick one, I would pick enterprise education because that in many ways underpins all the other skills. If you have good enterprise education in schools or in colleges, you can help equip young people not just to potentially set up their own business, you can also potentially equip young people more generally to go into the world of work and give them skills such as being able to take their initiative, being able to take risks, being able to learn from their mistakes. And there's a lot of evidence out there to suggest that enterprise education can be hugely beneficial to young people in terms of bridging that gap between education and employment and showing that there's potential routes for them which don't necessarily have to be going onto a graduate scheme or getting an apprenticeship or going into a job. There are lots of other ideas out there and things they can do, and whatever they do, not everyone is going to become an entrepreneur, but most people, I feel, need to become enterprising, as you might put it, in aspects of their daily life.
I definitely agree that employment skills and enterprise skills are vital, but alongside that I think it's got to be so that they're transferable skills that they're gaining, but I think that would aim at a specific certain type of young person, and there's also a mixed type of young person within school settings, so you've got to, I think it's important to focus on the broader, the broader idea. So for example, political education, that's quite important as well, so that young people are aware how they can contribute towards decisions made within their area and decisions that are going to potentially affect them in the future. Alongside that, I think well-being, emotional well-being for young people as well, helping them to gain skills that will prevent them from being stressed in the future or helping them to deal with challenging situations. But also I think academic skills are important as well. They are obviously focused on, in my opinion, a lot in schools already, so it would be the other broader areas I think that we'd need to look at really at this stage.
I agree with everything that's just been said, but I think the main reason is confidence. Young people need confidence to actually go to these businesses, to start their life. They need to be able to approach people in the streets and ask questions, simple things, maybe just to ask directions if they're lost. Without confidence, obviously, they'll be shy, they won't be able to talk, they won't be able to get anywhere in life.
I believe that personal, health, social, and indeed even economic education, collectively, that's the focus. We don't have to trim it down. I think young people do deserve to have as much education as possible, and these 4 or 5 broad areas cover everything that a young person needs. For example, if we chose only financial education, but we don't educate them on relationships. So they could be working and then be bullied in their relationship to give their money to their partner, or they're earning money, they're working, yes, they've got a job or they're entrepreneurs, but then they don't know how to vote on taxation, or they don't know how much they're being taxed or where the money should go in society. So I think they all work together. I know obviously there is a need to prioritize, but I do think all of them to be prioritized together as a whole. Thank you.
I think Matt has a question.
Yeah, I had a question specifically for Jamie, actually. You spoke about employability, and you spoke about what you felt was maybe a flaw in an exam system in preparing young people for employment. But could you give us maybe some suggestion of an education system that you feel would better prepare you? How would you want to be taught to be better prepared?
I don't think there's a problem with the teaching. I think there's a problem with the examination. You're testing young people in an impractical situation, and also testing things that aren't necessarily relevant to any employer. From my point of view, I think that grades are something that employers are going to look at. So I'd say, okay, how about testing people's customer service skills, and how about teaching customer service skills to begin with? Because any entry-level job for any young person is going to involve them interacting with customers. In a realistic bit, most of us are going to have to go through one of those jobs. From my point of view, I thought that work helped prepare me for that. So do I think we can change it as an education system? I'm not sure what I'd suggest to be different from it, but I would say the way that we examine people isn't reflective of their intelligence or their ability to work.
Thank you.
And a question from Solomon, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask Matthew in particular. You sort of defined life skills as PSHE, just two very sort of simple, quick questions. Did you learn PSHE as a subject when you were at school?
I mean, yes.
Yeah, okay. And when you learnt that, did you feel that it prepared you for life?
Yes.
It did?
But only to an extent.
Okay, so what needs to be done further in terms of if PSHE is an overriding body that can prepare young people for life, what needs to be done in terms of PSHE to do that?
The enthusiasm from the staff. So I mean, it's been mentioned earlier in the session with Ofsted and the PHSE Association and so on, that there needs to be direct training for staff or teachers that provide this kind of education. So I think that would help, because for a person to go into that specific field, that specialization, they must be passionate about it. So the same way you will get a passionate history teacher, you get a teacher who's passionate about personal social health and education.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Is it possible to add something on to the end of that? I think something that's not added in PSHE that's actually vitally important, and from my experience helped me endlessly, is I don't think young people are taught coping mechanisms to deal with life. For me, because of obviously the situation I was going through, I was taught cognitive behavioural therapy that helps me deal with situations on a day-to-day basis, and it's probably stopped me falling into a depression and being actually, although I don't have any qualifications from school, it still helped me develop a drive to be able to go on and move into the working world. So I think that that's something that's really neglected from PSHE.
I'd like to ask, who do you think has the greatest responsibility with teaching young people life skills, and who do you think for you has given you like the most impact in those skills? Do you want to start from Matthew this end?
As I mentioned forward of the written evidence we sent in from Newcastle, we believe that every part of society contributes to making a child, so religious organisations, family, school, everything. But what we're saying is, because young people are in school almost every day, and for a majority, that the onus lies with the school to be able to assist, not solely, but it's an integral part of a child growing. Okay. So definitely the school.
I agree with him there. There's definitely everyone needs to be involved. It's basically the adults in the children's life, the teachers, the parents. They need to support the child and also point them in the right direction for life.
I feel that it is the education system that plays a very important part in developing young people. So I would say that the responsibility does lie with them, but to an extent, as it was mentioned previously. I think young people will gain life skills through their own experiences, but it's the responsibility of the education system to guide them and direct them into identifying how they can actually gain life skills through their experiences. So for example, advising young people that even a negative situation to see the positive in it, and some young people may not look to do that initially, but if they're guided towards doing that, I think the education system should play an important role in helping young people. Alongside that, I think it can also be the responsibility of the peers, the other young people in society, to assist young people if they can, and based on their skills and their experiences, to share that with the peers and other young people as well.
How do you think parents and schools then can link in to get the best for the young people?
I think it's vital that parents and schools work together to help young people achieve life skills. I think to an extent that does happen, but maybe more engagement between the two would be beneficial in identifying which key areas young people find that they need to develop in order to have life skills.
Okay. Thank you.
I would say that the primary responsibility of teaching life skills should be with the education system, but there may be additional things that others can do, such as parents, guardians, mentors, other young people, or other people who young people associate with, who can assist with that. And I take that view, as I kind of covered briefly in the evidence I sent in, because I think it's an unwise idea to rely on other people and rely on other avenues for that to happen. A young person may not have any parents. A young person may have parents, but who don't know very much about life skills. They may not have parents who are willing to teach them about life skills, even if they know. They may have parents who are willing to teach them about life skills, but whose knowledge might be out of date. I gave, for example, a quote from a young person in the written evidence, where she was fortunate enough to come from a family who talked to her about politics, took her to museums, and where her father was a banker and could teach her about financial education. And not everyone has that, and that's why I think it's important that the education system has the primary responsibility for it, but parents can and should add to it as well if they are there, and so should others.
Okay.
I'd like to ask, what's the function of school if it's not preparing for young people after work? After school, sorry. Isn't that the whole point of us going to school? Without that, it has no function, and that's what I sometimes feel that our education has moved into at the moment, is it churns out one kind of puzzle piece, and society is a full puzzle, and we've just got lots of mismatching pieces where we haven't got enough. So I would say, yes, there's definitely reliability on the school, but also if we use this school's generation to teach things like parenting skills, then it's something that could become the responsibility of parents in the future to help young people learn life skills.
No, thank you, Nathan.
This is for Andrew. You mentioned just then, and also you, Afsha, as well, you also mentioned, there was a great quote in your call for evidence, Andrew, that says, one should not assume that everyone has the same home life or even parents have the knowledge to pass on to their children.
Yeah.
So you've said that, and Afsha, you said that schools should work with parents.
Yeah.
What would you suggest schools could do to make sure parents have the knowledge to pass on to their children?
That's actually quite a tough question, and that's not necessarily something I have a huge amount of experience on. A large part of it would be, I suppose, in terms of the outreach that schools do with parents, at parents' evenings or through letters to parents or whatever else. Part of it could be having some kind of basic information available on websites. Part of it could be telling parents about places they can go to learn about their own financial skills or other skills. And indeed, in some cases, you may end up having a situation where a young person teaches their parent about a particular subject. So there's all kinds of ways it can be done. But as I say, the primary job of it should be the school, and if parents can add to it, great.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Carrie had a question?
Can I go back to what you were saying about the peer involvement when it comes to education with PSHE? Do you mean that on a formal basis, where you have things like peer educators who are then actually doing the training, or do you mean that in the more informal friendship way?
I think it could be incorporated into the curriculum or incorporated into a school setting. For example, young people who may have previously attended a school, returning back to that school after they've achieved their goals and their targets, and inspiring young people and acting as a good role model. So I think it could definitely be incorporated within a school setting, but also informally. I think it could be something, like at youth clubs and other young people settings like youth councils, working with them to establish ways of encouraging young people to achieve their targets and their dreams, and also to inspire them a little bit as well.
Okay. Thank you. Now I'd like to move over to Sam.
Can you briefly outline your experience of PSHE and citizenship education, particularly focus on the impact it's had on you, and if you could change one thing about your PSHE education, what would it be and why? Can I start with Matthew, please?
I don't know if I'll be able to speak on behalf of the people that I am representing, because we've got some amazing case studies. Most of them do appreciate the PSHE education they have gotten, and it has had a tremendous impact on their lives. However, there is a proportion of that number of people who we surveyed who actually disagreed with that point of view, and actually said, because they didn't feel as though it was part of anything to do with them really. And we have stark percentages of where we have young people who say PSHE education doesn't make any impact to them. So I think there is a contrast between what teachers are saying about the impact it's having, but what young people are saying about what's happening.
Thank you.
We found that most of the students didn't care less about PSHE. They thought it was a useless subject. Personally, from personal experience, I just thought it was about drugs and sex education. That's all it came up with. But it didn't need, to be honest, you didn't really need to touch on that. It was on that. You just needed to touch the fact that not to do it, and just a slight education on it. But you took maybe a couple of terms just on drugs and just on sex, which I didn't think was necessary.
In my opinion, I feel that those lessons can be quite narrow and basic, and for me personally, I think it can be quite I would be quite disinterested. I think there needs to be a more practical approach taken to those lessons. And going back to the point that was made about customer service, having like sessions within those lessons where you can maybe act out customer service scenario and help young people to gain life skills through practical experiences, just so that they can engage better in the lesson and also be more interested. And that would also help them to realise how what they're learning actually, how it refers back to the real world.
I should probably add a slight caveat by saying that I was at school a few years ago, so things may have changed slightly since I was there. But I did have PSHE lessons, but I don't recall learning very much, if anything, from them. In three particular areas, I've learnt about them, but I've learnt about them later. So citizenship, for example, I didn't learn about it at school. I learnt about it later because I was fortunate enough to study A-level politics, and that's where I learnt about politics and how it works. In terms of enterprise education, I've never had any formal enterprise education at all. All I've had is being fortunate enough to do young enterprise when I was 16, and learning about business law and practice on a course I did last year called the Legal Practice course, which trains you to become a solicitor. But I'm getting this in my 20s, not in my teenage years. Financial education, very much the same thing. I haven't learnt about that at school. I've only learnt about it later on by learning basic things about tax, for example, on the LPC. These things would have been very helpful to me to learn back in school, but I wasn't taught them, even though I had those lessons.
From my point of view, I want to know why it has life skills is limited to PSHE, because I use maths on a daily basis, use English on a daily basis. Actually being able to format an email template to be able to send out, surely that's the kind of life skills that we're talking about. Why is it have to be limited to PSHE? I don't think that helps you. From a PSHE point of view, my experience was probably quite limited in it. I wasn't always at school all the time, so therefore I didn't really participate in a lot of it. I would say I learnt most of my life skills outside of it when I started working in the workplace, and also within the team programme I did at the Prince's Trust, where I was taught interview training, where I was taught CV building, and it's skills that I've then been able to help pass on to other young people.
Yeah, it wasn't to say that life skills are limited, and not that we're limited at all to PSHE. It's to say that we're asking what life skills have you had taught in PSHE. We're considering life skills across all of the curriculum.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
I'll just put this into context. So the Newcastle Youth Council did some research, obviously, for this, and just over 65% of young people said that PSHE education was beneficial. whereas you see almost 90% of teachers saying that it is. So there is a difference. And just over 50% of young people saying citizenship education is important, but then you have 80% of teachers saying it's important. So there's a stark difference. And then just to go back to the question Solomon asked earlier, if young people are part of the process to design these lessons or these curricula, then that would definitely help, because you have situations whereby students are only being taught 32% of them are being taught about how to be a parent, 34% about hate crime, but 69% of them want it. So there are stark differences. So if young people are asked what information they want, there is a real hunger, there is a real thirst for PSH education for young people, definitely in Newcastle.
Thank you. I think we have a question from Izzy.
Matthew and Afsha, you kind of touched on this a little bit. We had evidence from Nathan Howarth, an NYP for Cheltenham and Tewkesbury, and he said that his experience was repetitive and boring. However, it's not memorable enough. So you said it wasn't interesting, the lessons weren't interesting. So I guess how do you manage, maybe with pupil engagement, as you said, Matthew, or how do you manage to ensure that people are remembering it, but it's not repetitive and boring? I was wondering if you had any opinions on that.
Go first.
Yeah, I think definitely a practical approach would help, but also I think from the point of view of a member of staff teaching these lessons, I think they've got to remember that not all young people are the same, and that different stages within their school life they're going to need to learn different skills. So on that basis, I'd say that they need to help to identify what young people actually want, what skills they want to learn, before they start planning out the lessons that they actually do. I think also it's very important that what you do learn in those lessons, they do relate back to the real world. And customer service was just one example, but I think there's a lot of other different things that can be focused on in those lessons. And as Rob said, not just the typical drugs or sex education. In the real world of work, I think there's a lot more that young people could be taught about and guided towards as well.
Thank you.
Okay, I think young people are creative, and they can design innovative means for young people to be educated. I think we can learn from success stories. So Ofsted has all that information, and the Department of Education has the information of good means and good methods that have been applied by teachers across the country. And I think the discussion of whether it should be taught by a maths teacher, a science teacher, or it should be done by specialists is a good question, because the young people we surveyed, over 60% of them said it shouldn't be taught by a teacher, or they don't know if it should be taught by a teacher. So that's another discussion that needs to be held. Who is in the right position to impart this kind of knowledge? And that raises the question of role models. I personally believe that there is a role model deficiency, and that's another matter that could definitely help this.
Thank you.
Now to Joel.
Okay, so my question is for Jamie. You said that at school your lessons had no criteria or structure, and they were almost taught in an experimental way. Can you just elaborate on what the Prince's Trust exactly did for you, what your school failed to do?
Okay. My school experience was basically taught PSHE within a classroom environment where you've got slides on a projector, which I think is a pathetic way to teach PSHE, to be honest, because I've never used, it's a classroom environment, it's not a relevant situation. From my Prince's Trust team programme, we actually did employability skills where we went along to Barclaycard, where we had mock interviews where they showed us different workplace environments, what would be expected of us. Even simple things like a lot of young people aren't prepared for how you need to dress for an interview properly, or what's the best ways to go about presenting yourself, even handshakes, and it's a case of these are actually fundamental skills that aren't taught within a school environment. I also think networking is another thing that Prince's Trust helped teach me, which obviously is not something that's covered in school, but if we work on the kind of theory in a perfect world, it would be entirely on your own skills that you were rated, but it's not. It's who you know and it's who you know, not what you know. So learning networking skills could be so beneficial to young people, and I think that that's where the Prince's Trust helped me, being able to say, okay, we did a pitch to Barclaycard to get funding towards our community project, and they taught me a little bit about interview training. We did a bit of run through about what kind of questions. Those kind of presentation skills actually have helped me infinitely, and I use them on a daily basis. So from my point of view, the Prince's Trust was a practical application of PSHE rather than in school, which was almost theoretical life skills.
No, thanks, Jim.
Thank you. And a question from Nikita.
What more would you like to have been taught in your PSHE lessons?
I'd like to have been taught more about interpersonal skills and how to actually work with people and to cope with different kinds of people in society, and also more transferable skills as well. And for me personally, I'd like to have been taught more about working in a professional environment as well. I think those are all skills that we would refer back to in the real world. And everything that we do, whether it's going to college, university, everything that we do is to build up towards a career or towards going into a job. So I think it's important to actually at some stage within school life experience what it would be like to work in a professional environment. And I think like work experience is something that is becoming, it's being like abolished from some schools. Some schools would no longer carry that out. So I think alternatives also need to be put in place, and that's something that they could incorporate within the lessons.
Thank you. Thank you. And a question from Dan.
I'm just wondering, do you feel that bringing in specialists for specific topics in PSHE would benefit your learning of any life skills that you'd like to know about? Anybody?
Anyone want to feel they can answer it? Yeah.
Specialists always help. The more information you can have from somebody who's in the know, the better. As I said, going to Barclaycard, we were dealing with specialists who deal with employment. So from my experience, I would say yes, definitely. The only thing I'd say is if you're with students that are uncomfortable being taught by different people, then you'd have to look at different ways to integrate them into the classroom. But I also think sometimes within the PSHE environment, being in a classroom with your peers isn't the best idea. The part of the most brilliant experience of my Prince's Trust course was being with people I wouldn't normally associate with, and then learning how to interact and work as a team with that. And I think that's the case of a lot of employers. You're going to be working with people outside of your comfort zone. So I think from that point of view, specialists could be really helpful.
Okay. Yeah.
That oh god, it's gone out of my head now. It depends on who's teaching, because outside agencies may not always be the best option. We've had comments from teacher respondents and pupil respondents that have said, an outside agency may be experts in their field, but they're not experts in education. And I think we cannot, throughout this inquiry and throughout our campaign, look down on or forget the amount of training our teachers go through and how specialist they are and how good they are, what they do. So for that reason, if an outside agency was to come in, we should not be totally reliant on them, because they may not be the best to deliver that education. It could be our teachers.
I agree there. I think it should be a teacher that's very approachable, that can get down to a child's level, where we can come up to them and ask them questions about life skills and maybe ask what we need to do, rather than being someone that's really strict as a teacher, and you'd probably fray away from actually going to ask questions to them.
Okay, Jeremy?
I disagree with that. Just on the point of view of saying that from when you move into a work environment, you're going to be taught by people that aren't teachers, and you're going to have to adapt to people that don't necessarily have teaching skills. So therefore, being taught by a specialist, I can kind of see what you're saying, that they might not necessarily know the best ways to teach it, but also they are the people that are going to be teaching you outside of school. So it might be a good idea to kind of not necessarily having to adapt the teacher's teaching style to the student, but teaching the student how to deal with different teaching styles.
Andrew?
If I could, I have kind of two thoughts on this. The first is that specialists can and should be used as far as possible, particularly in areas like enterprise education, because one of the good things about enterprise education when it's done well is when you can get employers into schools to actually talk to kids and help them kind of understand how what they're learning is relevant to the real world. And so in that sense, at least, specialism and specialists, as you might want to call them, can be very helpful. However, I'd also like to kind of challenge the question slightly, because I don't think it's just about specialists. For example, again, in the context of enterprise education, I think there's more we can do to teach teachers how to teach it, if you see what I mean. For example, there was a poll from 2011, which I wasn't able to cite in my written evidence, but it was done by the Aldridge Foundation, by YouGov for the Aldridge Foundation, and they surveyed about 1,000 teachers. 72% said that they believed that pupils who were taught at school to develop the ability and desire to be entrepreneurial and to deal with challenging situations would be better prepared for real life. So they liked the idea. But only 35% recalled actually being given training to help them to teach in an entrepreneurial way. So I think that there's something that can be done about that as well as by getting more specialists in.
Okay, thank you. And Izzy, you had a question?
Many of you have mentioned employability skills as a huge life skill that we need to be taught. So therefore, do you think that work experience should be taught as a life skill in schools? And would there be any value in making it statutory? Because I think there are some shifts as to whether it is or not in certain areas. Afsha, if you want to start.
Yeah, I think work experience is vital, and from my experience, it was the work experience that I carried, that I attended, that encouraged me to then go into the real world of work. So I think it's something that every young person should have the opportunity to do. I mean, at the moment, from my understanding, it's not something that every school would carry out. So I think if they're not going to have the resources to actually carry out work experience, there should at least be an alternative in place. I think, based on the other question about specialism as well, bringing a specialist in, like an employer, could be an alternative to help inspire a young person to working in the real world. And I think it would obviously contribute towards employment skills as well. If employers are willing to come into schools and work with young people, then I think that would also help community engagement as well.
I definitely agree with that. It's vital that we need work experience. Once you get there, you're working under different conditions. It's not in a classroom silent. It also prepares you for what you actually want to do in college and maybe going to university. For example, I went and did something in sports development, and it kind of either leads you towards what you want to do or it pushes you away from it. You can make your decision of what job you want to go into after work experience.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move swiftly on to the next question from Matt.
We've heard this morning and through the written evidence that we received several different suggestions about how PSHE, or more broadly life skills, should be structured. For example, whether it should be integrated into core subjects and taught within maths, English, history, or whether it should be a separate standalone part of the curriculum. How would you like to see it delivered?
Well, I did cover this briefly in my written evidence, but I would say it needs to be a bit of both, because it's important to teach certain aspects of it separately. I mean, you can't really teach how to set up a business in geography, for example. It's just pointless.
So which aspects would you like to see taught separately?
Well, aspects I'd like to see taught separately would perhaps be about the specific knowledge of things such as different types of business in the context of enterprise education, or about how to set up and run a business, or about the specific knowledge essentially. But things like focusing on employability skills, that's the kind of thing that can be embedded in the curriculum. If you look at the Darwin Aldridge Community Academy example, which I cited in the written evidence, you can see that they have, for example, enterprise attributes embedded throughout the whole curriculum and in all their lessons and in all their lesson plans. So it can be done, and it should be done.
See, I disagree. With the whole geography bit, is geography is a big part of business. Knowing your geographical locations you can use infinitely, so it can be part of all parts of the curriculum. I think that's a good way to teach it, and also through an enterprise example, it's just being able to say, okay, if you want to learn business skills, then of course let's teach young people how to set up a business, and let's use that using all of maths, English, science. All of it can go together. It can be tied in. I think the problem at the moment is we seem to be producing a lot of academic students with no practical application of the knowledge that they have. So from my point of view, I'd like to see it taught in even as a class, as students, could we set up an enterprise and how would we go about it? And therefore you've got the transferable skills for when you come into a business.
Since everyone's talking about geography, I just want to throw in the IDD level geography, but I have nothing to add to that conversation. I'm just going to go back to what Matthew said. That's weird because mine is Matthew, but anyways, I think it should be a combination of both. So it should be integrated into certain subjects. So, in maths, we can have finance, and government politics, we get the usual citizenship and so on. but there should be separate blocks in the timetable that is designated to some core aspects that cannot be, fed into the core curriculum.
Could you give us any suggestions of what you think those might be that wouldn't be integrated so well into other subjects?
That's a hard question, because I was going to say sex relationships, but to an extent, sex could be put into biology, for example. But the issue of relationships is very, very crucial. In our research, we saw only about 30% or so were ever had the discussion of sexual orientation in their PSHE classes. However, this is a growing issue amongst young people. And, it's kind of hard to fit that in anywhere else because it is a sensitive issue. Issues like homophobia and so on and so forth. So those are very, and racial discrimination, those are sensitive issues. So those the ones need to be taught separately and if necessary by independent or outside agencies. I do believe it should be statutory. As an MYP, as Member of Youth Parliament, I would stand by that every day, all day. However, I do believe that there should be some form of flexibility in a discussion with another Youth Parliament member for Newcastle, Beth Solomon, and the principal of a school earlier this week. He said that he wouldn't want to sign a pledge whereby he was tied to doing things in a certain way that couldn't be applied on a local level because they're already ticking boxes. But if the statute was too rigid, then they won't be able to function to the best of their potential.
Thank you.
Jamie, would you like to?
I was going to say, you said about teaching certain skills separately. I'd go for networking and customer service skills because they don't really necessarily fit into another subject. Normally, basically, people skills, they're not academic, so therefore they need to be in their own little section is what I'd put it through as. But on the whole idea of work experience, I think sometimes there's a huge problem with getting employers to take on work experience, which it must be such a burden to schools. Trying to sort out work experience placements for people on a course at the moment, I know how difficult it is to go through. And although I think it's a vital part, you'd have to actually look at a broader range than just school and actually saying, can we make it obligatory for employers to take on work experience as part of a citizenship development?
Okay, thank you. Should we move on to Solomon?
Thank you, Chair. So when you were at school, what did your school do to allow you to feed into citizenship or PSHE?
In my case, since we didn't really have any citizenship, not very much. They just kind of taught us what classes there were and didn't really give us much input.
Okay.
I don't know about others.
Personally, I was never aware that there was any option to, contribute toward lesson plans or to make our teachers aware what we'd like to learn in those lessons. But I think it's definitely something that teachers should look to do in schools. They should try to identify what young people want to learn in certain
And what
lessons.
benefit will that give?
Because I think young people would then be interested in learning that, and they would also realise how what they're learning how that's going to help them in the future.
Do you think that goes across the board in terms of all subjects, not just citizenship and PSHE?
I think it would depend. I think there should be some kind of standard where each school should allow children, to input into lesson plans, but tailored towards each different area, each different council. So I don't think each area is going to need the same level of input from students, but it's about identifying how that can help if it's possible to do so.
Robert?
What was the question again?
No problem. What did your school do to allow you to feed into the development of citizenship?
We didn't have any input on how the lessons would run or what was put into the lessons. We just it was our form tutors that set our lessons up. We went to the lesson and they didn't even know what they were doing themselves. They seemed to have to look through files and find a PowerPoint, and they just seemed to read through the PowerPoint. Just being more organised in lessons would probably help.
So give me an example of how do you feel then with your input that something better could have been delivered?
Maybe just finding what we wanted to do, just asking young people what they wanted to know about and organising the lessons around what we've just said. Just listen to us.
Okay.
Okay. I attended Newcastle Sixth Form College, and there were various means in which citizenship education was taught. So there was the usual through the social sciences department, so we had a very enthusiastic head of department, and obviously I did government politics, and other students did citizenship and so on and so forth. But it wasn't limited to students who study social sciences. There was the ballot initiative that came up to Newcastle, so young people were able to get involved in politics that way also. And my college did its best to ensure that it was producing global citizens. So there was a lot of, it was very much citizenship oriented. We have a students' union, and there was a lot going on with volunteering, V Inspired and so on. And we had our homegrown volunteering organisation, which is called SEEN, so Sustainable Communities and Environments Northeast. So yes, it's citizenship, but from an environmental perspective, economically and so on and so forth. So there is a lot in obviously where I'm coming from, where we have had a lot to do so.
And the same very brief follow-up question, which I said to both Robert and Afsha, what benefit would there have been if you were given your voice in how these programmes were delivered?
Is that to me?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. I think they would have been better, no doubt. But what I can say is our voices were sought. So we have had an input, and it has been effective. I mean, it produced me, so hey,
well, who knows?
I think Jamie wanted to.
I think the truth is, I was taught how to pass exams, and I think that's what schools are marked on. At the end of the day, they're not marked on whether you produce good citizens. You're marked on whether you produce people that get good A-level results. So from my experience, I think that yes, they definitely tried to put things in place, but overall, what we were educated on wasn't how to be good people, how to work as part of society. It was taught on, can you do all your knowledge within a certain amount of time?
Okay. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Carrie has a question?
I'd just like to know from either your own experiences or through talking to other young people, what you feel the best way would be for teachers to engage with the young people and find out what actually needs to be taught in schools. Because it's very easy for teachers to just ask students, but it's a bit harder to actually draw the information out from students.
Their peers?
Yeah.
I think it'll be best, not be best, but it's a suggestion that you could just work with their peers, because it's more often than not, young people will listen to young people, not always, but in most cases, especially if it's a serious matter. So if, not all teachers, but I mean, some teachers are amazing at connecting with young people, that's amazing, but not all teachers can do that, as we said. So in that regard, young people, and I mean, we've had comments, again, from student respondents who've said they would be so interested in, speaking to their peers, or you could maybe the year above or 2 years above could speak to, students in lower levels, so things like that would definitely work.
I agree with what I just said. Peers maybe have a young person that's allocated the job of feeding back to the teachers to what the kids want and what young people want in the lessons.
Okay, anyone else like to answer that question? No? Okay, question from Nathan.
A lot of you mentioned, and it's been a recurring theme throughout the day really, teachers that are passionate about the subject. So in this case it was citizenship. I know you mentioned that, Matthew. Do you find that a passionate teacher about any subject will give you more of an insight into the whole topic and make you want to learn more?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think it does definitely help.
Sure.
Because if you're passionate about something, it reflects in the way that you're putting that across, and then I think that would project onto the students to an extent as well. If you're teaching a subject that you don't actually have a good understanding of yourself, then I don't think that is going to help you put that across to somebody else. So I think it definitely helps to be passionate and to have emotion behind what you're actually teaching.
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever been in those lessons when the teacher kind of goes off topic. Yes? Yeah. In most cases, that's a passionate teacher. Yeah. Because they can't contain what's just left in the syllabus, and they just have to go into something else. Especially if you're in maybe a subject that deals with current affairs, something new pops up they want to talk about, and then they kind of remember halfway through, like, oh no, we've got to finish, or 5 minutes left. That's a passionate teacher. Or a bad teacher.
Okay. That would be the point I'd say is actually those passionate teachers don't necessarily help students when it comes to their examinations, because if a teacher doesn't manage to teach you what's on the curriculum, I don't know if the curriculum actually gives span for teachers to be as passionate as they necessarily want to be about a subject.
Yeah, I understand that, but you have to put in perspective you can have a few days off just to really get to know a teacher and have that passionate relationship, so you know what's going on with the teacher and you can find out all things and get the best from the topic.
Shall we move on to Isabel's question?
So you were saying, Jamie, that lots of life skills aren't taught because teachers are too busy filling students with the knowledge needed to pass their exams. Some people suggest that a good way of getting life skills taught in schools would be to set them as an examination. What do you all think of that?
I completely agree with that. I mean, if you're looking at employers and they're trying to get an accurate representation of someone's ability to work, then what better to have them tested on things that are actually relevant to work. So I could completely see, I think that's a really good idea. The way sometimes I see school is, if I was to use the metaphor of saying you've got a monkey, an elephant and a lion all in front of the exam board, and the exam board goes, okay, in order to treat you all fairly, we're going to give you the same exam, climb the tree over there. It doesn't work. You've got lots of different minds, and surely in a world where we've got a better understanding of how people learn in a different way, that we should be able to provide something that we can examine people best on their strengths. So not everyone is going to be a creative person, but you can also use examinations to say, well, yes, they might not have this academic side, but they could be used in a creative environment. And employers could then use that to say, oh, well, we don't actually always need this one kind of person over here. We've got another puzzle piece over here which would be just as good or would be relevant to what they want in their workplace.
Do you not think if everyone's different, then an exam wouldn't actually suit them to find these life skills, that maybe the employers would see that themselves? Because if it's an exam, then, like you said, it might not suit everyone.
I can see what you're saying. It's just the case of whether I think employers would then take that on board. I don't see, at the moment, you've got to have a standard way to compare people. Let's be honest, you have to have some kind of examination, but whether you do it, you can have different examinations that say, okay, we're trying to reflect this person's ability in this way. When it comes to this kind of skill, they're good at it. But at the moment, if you have all your exams are formatted in the same way, well, life isn't formatted in the same way, so it doesn't work, personally, I think.
I think that it could be like a vocational course or an accredited course. It doesn't necessarily have to be an exam that's taken. So it could be more vocational, where it's coursework that's taken, or there could be the option to have it as an exam and a vocational accredited course to suit the different needs of different young people that we have.
Okay, thank you. Izzy has a question.
You've all been very, very work focused, so focusing on employability skills and the world of work after school or college. But in skills for life, I would have put a more equal emphasis on things such as how to live sustainably, or engaging in democracy, or learning how to manage finance. I was wondering whether you would, I know from your personal experience, your main interest is employability. I was wondering if you would place that in kind of equal weight in life skills, and if that should be taught in school, as a subject or through other subjects.
Definitely, entirely in that and parenting skills, because let's be honest, if you're a parent for life, so clearly that's going to be something that's really beneficial. Yeah, I completely agree that although we're going on a lot about employability, that there is a hell of a lot of life skills out there that need to be learned that aren't taught, and we experience them as we grow up, so therefore it needs to be a foundation for it.
I like the question, I completely agree. The only reason I didn't include financial education in the written evidence is because it wasn't quite as relevant to tackling youth unemployment as things like enterprise education, and because I didn't really have enough space. But I wanted to keep it to 6 pages if I could. But I wholly support the idea, and I think it should be done just as much as enterprise education.
Do you think it should be, we talked earlier about a statutory subject, a separate subject, or do you think perhaps you could engage students through maths, or do you think that might deviate their attention?
Well, actually, my understanding is that from 2014, the national curriculum is putting compulsory personal financial education on the statutory curriculum, and that it's being taught partly through maths and partly through citizenship. So it is actually already happening, and that was actually the other reason I didn't include it in the written evidence, because something is already being done about it. And I hope that comes out, and I hope that works well.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. I'd just like to echo obviously what they've both said. So moving away from obviously enterprise education, about 50% of the young people we surveyed said they wanted to be taught how to vote. but 42% had only been taught what they wanted to vote. About 80% wanted to be taught how to vote. So again, there is a desire. Only 30% have been taught about petitions and how to engage in direct democracy, but 70% want to be taught that, and only 41% on issues like the UN Convention on the Rights of a Child. Only 40% know that information. So obviously that's very saddening. On the issues of cultural awareness and community cohesion, we've said, because the issue of multiculturalism is emerging very, very much in Britain, ethnic minorities and faiths and so on and so forth, it's very crucial. However, of the 154 young people we surveyed, only about 25.7% know anything about community cohesion, but about almost more than double that amount wanted to be taught about it. The same goes for sustainable living and cultural awareness. So there is a deficiency, but there is a need for it.
Okay, thank you. And to move on to Joel's question.
Okay. So we've been told about the important link between life skills and future employment. Do you think that employers should have a responsibility to work with their potential future employees?
Yeah, definitely. I think that employers should work with schools and the pupils and engage better together in order to establish what kind of young peoples would be best suited to certain working environments. So Kirklees carried out some research, Youth Council, and also we held an event where businesses came together with young people and also schools, and we found that a lot of businesses were very interested in helping young people develop the skills, and they was very interested in young people coming to work in their setting. But I think we've found that young people don't feel like they're ready to go into employment straight after leaving school. So I think it's the school's responsibility to help to develop the young people so that the businesses can then work with the schools to help to actually help recruit young people into their settings.
And that's the next question about how do you think schools and employers should work together?
I think they should definitely.
Or do you think they should work more closely together?
Definitely, yeah. I think they should
this?
definitely, link together. Maybe identify a set of employers within certain areas, certain districts that will constantly kind of take young people, maybe from certain schools within the district. So, I think it's definitely something that could help, move us out of the youth unemployment situation. And I think it would be nice to have more businesses on board to support young people as well.
Just two quick thoughts. Firstly, there's a report by City and Guilds which was done last year, which has a brilliant quote on this subject, which says, "The link between education and employment is central to tackling the issue of youth unemployment." So I completely agree with you and with that sentiment. And secondly, in terms of how we do it, I think actually a lot of employers are interested. And I cite statistics in the written evidence showing that many employers have to actually do additional training for young people who join their ranks because they don't have sufficient literacy or numeracy skills or other skills. But the primary responsibility needs to be on schools, and at the moment a lot of schools don't do it very well because frankly they don't have to. There's nothing in the Ofsted framework, as I understand it, the school inspectorate framework, which assesses schools based on the level of engagement they have with employers, and I think that might be the obvious starting point, because if schools have to look at that kind of thing as well as all the other stuff they have to look at, then they will do it.
I think, personally, I just feel that the most misallocated resource is human potential, and that goes with employers. Now, all credit to Cineworld when I first started there as an entry level at 18, just learning to mop a floor. Okay, I cannot tell you how many people have come in who don't know how to mop properly, and just basic skills, but they're skills that need to be taught, and employers have to take the time with people in general to just be able to say, okay, we are going to work with this person so they can actually do it. But food preparation as well, things like that are all actually very transferable skills that employers can teach you. So when you're linking it in within a classroom environment, you should be, of course, linking it in with a work environment, because that's where it has any application.
Thank you. And Matt has a question.
Yes, you've all spoken very favourably about employer involvement in educating young people in life skills. We had something raised on a panel earlier this morning about the fact that does it not unnerve you slightly that you're then getting involved private sector firms whose primary function is to profit make and not to look after the young people. Does that not concern you at all?
Isn't that the point of business though? Regardless of whether it's acceptable or not, that's the world. And I think as soon as you can accept that actually businesses are there to make a profit, that at the end of the day, a business isn't as concerned with your personal development as you are. The business's principle is to make more money. So you have to accept that, but then you can also work with that, knowing that that's the case. Well, you can make it beneficial for both companies. If they're getting publicity out of helping young people, then that can help drive their profit. You can play it against each other. So although I agree you don't want to make it so people take advantage, it's an essential part to accept that actually businesses are there to make profit. That's their point. And you are basically moving into a work environment, and you will play a part in what they want you to do, because that's the point of it.
I agree, and I think we have to be practical here in thinking about where young people actually go when they leave school, and a large portion of them will end up going to working in businesses, and businesses will be taking on those young people, and we have to be aware of that, and we can't and shouldn't shut out businesses just because they're for profit. I mean, that's what they're there for, that's what they do.
But the point that was raised this morning was it's very different going to a business as a potential employee and actually inviting businesses to be actively involved in educating our young people.
If it prepares them better for the world of work, I don't see why not, as long as you have appropriate
That's fine,
safeguards.
that was the question, so thank you.
I mean, I think that employers can sometimes help to inspire young people. If you want to work in an office and somebody who actually owns a business where there's an office environment comes in and speaks to young people, or helps to develop young people, that can help inspire a young person instead of a teacher standing there and textbook material reading something out. So I think it is the way forward, but obviously it would depend how it's actually approached, and I think that it may depend on which local authority is dealing with it, and it will probably vary across the areas, but I think it is definitely the way forward, working with businesses and schools together.
Okay, thank you. We'd like to thank you all for being here and answering our questions. We'd like to ask if there was anything anyone would like to see briefly, mention if there's anything you'd like to see as an outcome of our inquiry. Does anyone have anything to add to that?
The only particular thing that occurs to me is I would like to see a recommendation from the Youth Select Committee that enterprise education be included in the national curriculum, or at the very least there be much stronger recognition of the need for it by the government.
Okay.
I'd like to see a more structured education system where it's less focused on academic skills and focused more on the real world, so transferable skills, and also preparing people with regards to emotional well-being, because I think that's vital, and it's important that young people are aware what it is like in the real world of work.
Okay, so that concludes this panel session. Order, order. Order, order. We'd like to welcome our witness panel to the final session of the day, and would like to start by asking them to introduce themselves. Would you like to start from Joy?
My name is Joyce Rochford. I'm Senior Development Officer, Curriculum for Excellence in the City of Edinburgh. It's a seconded post, and my substantive post is a Deputy Head Teacher in a secondary school, so I wear two hats, I think.
Okay. And Amanda?
Hello. I'm Amanda Crisford. I'm the Partnership Manager at the Hastings Academy. My role encompasses fostering links between the Academy and the community, businesses, voluntary groups, parents, primary schools, opening the door between the Academy and our community. And if I may, I'd just like to briefly give you a potted history of our school, the journey our school's made.
Do you want to come on to that later and finish the introductions first? And
I'm Louisa Thomson and I'm an Education Policy Advisor at the Association of Teachers and Lecturers, and we're a trade union and professional association representing around 160,000 teachers, head teachers, lecturers and support staff. And the team that I work in particular is Education Policy and Research, and the new National Curriculum Framework's been a key issue that we've been looking at the moment because it's the biggest shake-up for years and will impact on our members considerably. So our submission was very much informed by the viewpoints of the teachers that we represent in all different kinds of schools and colleges, so I hope that's useful in the context of your inquiry.
Thank you. So based on your experiences, how far do you think the education system has progressed in terms of supporting young people to develop these kind of life skills? And what challenges do you think remain, and what do you think it will look like when we think this is a successful programme? Would anyone like to start?
I think the Curriculum for Excellence really does have a very good framework for actually developing skills for learning, life and work. And I think it's the framework's quite clear, and we have to address those from age 3 right up to age 18, and it has to be done across all curriculum areas. What that's really created, I think, in Scotland is a whole cultural shift, and we're suddenly realising that we have to remove that artificial barrier between the school and the rest of life. And as I was listening to the young people earlier, I realised that that is a mental barrier that we have to actually start demolishing. And so I think at the heart of Curriculum for Excellence is this idea of working in partnership. And partners aren't just about employers, it can be partners with anybody that's actually going to develop the young person in whichever way it's deemed appropriate. So I think I would say that I'm very pleased with the curriculum we're creating in Scotland. I think it's a work in progress. And I think I'm saying that because the framework is there, but how we actually deliver and how we put the meat on that framework will be very much down to the different cultural influences within an area. And I think Edinburgh is a particularly different city, for example, from Aberdeen or Falkirk or wherever it is. So I think that each place will have enough autonomy to create the type of education system that will actually address the needs of the young people within their area. And I think that's a good thing, that flexibility, but within that clear framework, it actually gives us a clear steer, but at the same time allows us to respond to some of the issues that were coming out in the panel before.
Okay, and Amanda, would that tell us?
Well, we fully support Curriculum for Life. We were the first academy in our area to sign the pledge, and that was through the inspiration and the commitment of our head teacher, who leads us and inspires us and fully supports the curriculum and understands, based on our cohort and our students, how important it is that we provide our students with the skills and qualifications to leave us fully equipped to go into further education and employment. We are an academy. We are an 11 to 16 academy, so we don't teach A-level courses. We are also a sponsored academy, and our lead sponsor is the University of Brighton, who is also a big supporter of a Curriculum for Life and has been instrumental in helping us to raise aspirations across the town. We were, 4 years ago, a failing school. Our predecessor school, Hillcrest, went into special measures, and in the space of 4 years, I'm pleased to tell you that we've become, we've recently had an Ofsted inspection and we've been graded as good. So we've gone from a failing school to a good academy in 4 years, and it's through the leadership of our head teacher and her continual commitment to providing excellent teaching, excellent staff, and her transparent way of opening the doors to organisations and her commitment to partnership across the town. Our students, we currently have 750 students on roll, 52% of which are pupil premium students, which means they're either on free school meals or have been in the last 6 years, which is a really high ratio. So we're constantly working to raise their aspirations and bring new enrichment activities to them. We're also 98% of our cohort is white British, so that gives you a little bit of an idea of our demographics. And many of you may already know that Hastings has been ranked the 20th most deprived area in the government's indices of multiple deprivation. So I'm sure some of you would have seen the recent report by Sir Michael Wilshaw highlighting the fact that the lowest performing group in the nation is poor white children living in coastal towns such as Hastings, which was named. Now we wish to buck that trend, and by supporting the curriculum of life and through many other things as well, we hope to be able to do that. And I think that there is an article on the BBC website that gives our opinion and views on what we're doing to improve the life skills of our students. So in short, we fully support the curriculum for life. We think it's extremely important, especially for our students in the demographics that I've just outlined to you. And we'll continue to strive to move that forward.
Louisa?
I'd just like to start by qualifying that in our submission we focus primarily on PSHE provision, as that's an area that we've commented on in previous reviews and that we've regularly spoken to our membership about. But to answer your question in terms of how the education system has progressed around this area, I think the fact that the importance of teaching life skills is now very much on the agenda speaks for itself, and our members repeatedly stress the importance of PSHE. And certainly our members believe that the education system has a very strong responsibility to help develop those life skills alongside developing pupils as successful learners with the confidence to play to their strengths. And as one member said to us recently, this is absolutely a social justice issue. It's through life skills that you explore and challenge inequalities. There are people in teachers' classrooms who have a range of different life experiences, and it's absolutely about developing adaptability, perseverance, determination, creativity, and everyone should have access to that. So I think those are the positives that we are now, everyone recognises the importance of that. But I suppose you said about the challenges that still remain, and for us I think it's really around the fact that PSHE can be quite low status, so in curriculum time it can get squeezed. It often comes across as lacking kind of backing in some schools. And really you need confident, trained teachers able to develop those lessons. I think those are the gaps that we found through talking to our members and that need to be prioritised in terms of next steps.
Okay, I believe we have a question from Joel.
Okay, so my question is from Amanda. You talk about good leadership and good teaching. Would you agree that it's shown in your school, in your academy, about how teaching has influenced the school from a bad school academy, to a very good academy? Now, would you agree that good leadership is influencing your way of teaching and influencing how the pupils are taught, and the enthusiasm, as you say, of your head teacher has again influenced your school as a whole? Would you agree that that is the truth, and more schools and academies need to follow what you do and your head teacher?
Absolutely. And it's also the commitment of our sponsor as well. They fully support the training of teachers, the excellence. They understand the importance of teaching life skills. They support us when we bring organisations in to enrich the curriculum. I'm sure our school teaches PSHE like any other school. There is limited time within the curriculum with the other core lessons that need to be taught, but we try and enrich it by bringing organisations in and freeing up certain times within the curriculum to do that, and that is done because our head teacher, or principal rather, firmly believes that it's important. We work with bodies of our students to increase their skills to present, to network, to meet and greet, to have confidence. They're skills that aren't necessarily within the curriculum, but we feel are important to our students when to equip them with the skills they'll need when they leave us.
Because your academy do personal social, like the PSCHE. Now, is that a copy of the PHSE, or would you ask other academies to follow that? Because it sounds really good in the little document that you've produced and how you teach it. as a whole is very good. Would you ask other places to do that or advise?
Before we answer, can I ask to keep answers short and questions on topic as well, because we haven't got too much time.
Absolutely. We're very happy to share good practice, and if other academies wish to come to us to see how we deliver and how we enrich the curriculum, then we would happily welcome them to the academy.
Okay, question to Louisa. In your evidence, you said that if school learning fails to make connections with other parts of people's lives, evidence suggests that children from poorer backgrounds who will be the most disadvantaged. Can you explain a bit more about this evidence and what it's telling you?
That came from us considering the new national curriculum framework that has been consulted on recently, and we really felt that in that draft programmes of study and the framework document, that the overemphasis on essential knowledge and core knowledge and the amount of prescription around some of the core subjects was the balance is not right at the moment, and obviously that's very important, but there is a real risk of kind of missing out on kind of concepts and skills and attitudes and that side of learning, and that especially at primary level, there's a risk of it actually demanding quite a narrow style of teaching and learning that would risk disadvantaging some pupils because it was just not really very reflective of the different ways that pupils learn. So that comment was in that context of a wider bit of work we've been doing around the national curriculum and trying to ensure that there's breadth and balance in the curriculum, that the balance between core and foundation and other subjects is maintained, and that it's not pushed down one particular direction.
Okay, thank you, and we'll move on to Nathan now.
This one is for you, Amanda. I went to an academy like yours, so I understand exactly what you're talking about. But I wondered, what extent was the young people of your academy involved in the structure of your curriculum for life, and what effects and challenges did you face in the short term of implementing the curriculum for life?
Implementing the curriculum for life is going to be an ongoing thing. We've only just begun our journey, and we're committed to seeing it through. We, like most other academy schools, have our structured PSHE, which covers the key areas that we've been asked to cover, and we have a dedicated team of teachers who teach those subjects. We work in partnership with a lot of our other organisations like the police, health professionals, Villiers Park, independent career advisors. We're also very pleased to say that we've achieved Investors in Career status recently. We have a student council, and we have a very strong set of senior students who have been involved with the curriculum for life, and we're seeking feedback from them all the time. In fact, we're training some up to start assessing teaching within classes, so they can go in and see how they're delivered within the academy.
So right now, what kind of impact and what input have they put into the curriculum for life, the young people?
They've been part of the process of the signing of the pledge, looking at the curriculum and looking to see how we can progress it and move it on. As I said, we've only just started the journey, but we're committed to continuing it. And we are going to, the commitment, we are going to appoint in September, we have appointed already, but they start in September, a new lead on PSHE, who's a senior member of staff, who can really, who's got experience of working with students and a student voice, so the two tie in very well with each other.
So to clarify, you're starting the curriculum for life in September?
No, it's already started.
It's already started. So what short-term effects have you seen? Like, because when academies and schools do things, you can very quickly see changes within the school and in the local community. Have you seen any of them yet?
I think we'd already started to see the changes. The whole ethos of the school is every child known.
Yeah.
We're, as I said, we welcome visitors in all the time, so our students are very much to the forefront of what visitors see when they come to us. They're more than capable of taking those visitors round. They've got the skills to present within several days of our new senior student body being appointed. They'd already presented to the local advisory body, so they're learning those presentation skills they're gaining self-esteem, self-confidence all the time.
Okay,
So we have seen through their improvement and through their confidence.
Sure.
Thank you. Dan, your question?
The Scottish education system, as we know, is halfway into moving to the curriculum for excellence. Being S6, I wasn't part of the programme. But for being the last year the standard grade this year, could you briefly summarise the main 4 aspects of it, which I think were successful learners, responsible citizens, effective contributors and confident individuals, please?
You want me to summarise
Summarise
what that
the
means?
whole, try and summarise
Summarise the whole curriculum for excellence.
Which is not easy every year.
I've asked
I asked teachers what it is and they say, you tell me.
I think what it is, it's an education system that really tries to create a learner's journey where the end of that journey will actually result in that young person reaching a positive destination. That is a career or a job. Now that learner journey could be as long as you go through medical school, whatever it is, or it could be quite a short journey. So the whole of everything we do really is about encouraging the young person to take opportunities and experiences that will help them understand themselves. It's not understanding what employers want, it's understanding how they would work in different situations and in different environments. So I think curriculum for excellence is about skills for learning, so good literacy, good numeracy, good exam results, working at the appropriate level for yourself so that you come out with a clutch of examinations and you are therefore a successful learner. But it's also, I think, looking at the individual and actually giving them the skills that they need to start their journey in terms of learning for life and learning for work. So I suppose it's quite a complex, and we describe curriculum as every single thing that happens to a learner on that journey from age 3 to 18, wherever it takes place. So it's not about school anymore, it's about wherever you are, and if it's it's been deemed a learning environment, and that could be with an employer, you could be working with a voluntary agency, and we have a very mixed approach to senior phase, if I just quickly tell you about that. So people between 15 and 18 are in senior phase in school. We've now come into the 16-year-old bracket with curriculum for excellence. So someone could have on their normal school timetable, school qualifications that they're doing, English, maths, whatever. They could also have one of their subjects that they're doing down at college. They could also have another subject where they're actually working with the Prince's Trust or some other group that are actually giving them some type of skills that they need to develop personally. So there can be a whole mix and match now. It's gone are the days when you just used to sit in class and you knew you had your 8 subjects to sit examinations in. It's now all about creating that very complex mosaic almost that's very individualised, and that's quite hard for educators to do because schools aren't really organised that way. This has been a great big learning curve for all of us, but we're very enthusiastic and we haven't got it right yet, and it is a journey, and you say we're bringing it in. We've been bringing it in for the last 4 years, and every year we're starting to do something a bit better, and I think if you spoke to me again in 10 years' time, I'll be retired by then, I hope. Anyway, somebody in my position will be able to say that it was a very successful journey because we listen to young people, we listen to parents, we listen to communities, universities, employers. The group that I actually sit on that look at senior phase across Edinburgh has a whole range of people in it, from economic development, not employers because we're not developing learners for their business, but economic development, our corporate body that looks at the future skills that economy needs, what's driving the economy. We look at universities, what do they need, what do colleges need? We have community learning and development, what are families and communities needing as well. So we're trying to create that mosaic by listening to as many people as we can. But at the heart of it, it's that individual learner. So everything we do has to come back to them. And earlier a chap said, I wish schools were sort of judged on what happens to people. Well, we are. Every single year, positive destinations are looked at by the Scottish Government and schools are held to account. And in Edinburgh, we got our figures last week, 89% of our young people who left at summer are still in sustained positive destinations, and I think that's pretty good, but we've got 11% that have fallen off the table, and that 11% we're going to focus more resources into hoping that doesn't happen next year. Every year we're getting better at doing this, and that is the journey. It's a complicated thing, but it's not about schools anymore, it's about us all.
Thank you. Louisa and Amanda, if you what comments on the model you just heard about in Scotland?
It sounds excellent. We'll be moving in that direction ourselves. I mean, listening to our students, providing them with the skills to thrive beyond us is absolutely key. Providing the town, our town in particular, which is always in the press as being sort of white and poor with sort of issues around transport, issues around employment. what we want to do, and what we're moving towards doing, is providing businesses with children, with adults that have got real skills, to move into the workplace. What we want to do is bring business back into the town, bring families back into the town, to show that the students within Hastings are well educated and well able to go into the world of employment with the skills they need to thrive and do well and be an asset to any business who employs them. So absolutely, and I think this is the first step, and we will move on with that.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know a huge amount about the Scottish context, but I think from what we've just heard, the thing that I like is that people's interests and needs are very much at heart of the curriculum. And I think one of the things that ATL had real concerns about with the new national curriculum framework that's being proposed in England at the moment is that it didn't really start with a debate about the aims and values and purpose and what it's actually for, and it didn't engage with stakeholders before the draft programmes were actually published. It just seems that actually Scotland was quite a different approach in the way of doing that. So I think that's something that we're quite interested in terms of what flexibilities and freedoms schools have in England to do innovative things around the curriculum within the context of this new national framework. So I think certainly we'll be looking closely at some of the examples and learning from Scotland and see if we can help disseminate some of that good practice with our members.
Louisa, just the ATL supports teachers from all 4 nations of the UK. Are teachers from different nations telling you different things?
In all honesty, at the moment, I would say no. And my comments around this are around kind of general surveys that we've done with members, and I didn't look too closely at where those were coming from in terms of the different nations. So I can't really comment too specifically on that, I'm afraid.
Thank you very much.
I believe Matt has a question.
Okay, very brief follow-up question for Joyce. You've spoken about the curriculum for excellence. It sounds fantastic, but what would you say that the other constituent nations of the UK can take from that, if anything? What one thing would you like?
Well, I did think about that actually. I think that what you really need to do is when you're creating any education system or changing your system, it has to be done through partnership working. I think you really need to have partners involved in the development of that system, but also you need partners to be involved in the delivery. So it's not, it has to go together. It can't be separate anymore. We need to join up what we do. And I think if you miss out some of the stakeholders, then it's a lopsided system. And if it's left to schools to do it for themselves or authorities or the government, it will have whatever they deem the focus should be, and we'll miss out some of the stakeholders. So I think those tough discussions have to be had, and it does take a long time. That is a lengthy, it doesn't just happen overnight. But I would say that's something that if I was to advise anyone in the, in the English education system, I would say that that's what I would strive for, the idea of partnership working for development delivery.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We'd like to move on to Joel.
Okay. So the responses to the government's recent PSHE consultation concluded that PSHE should be afforded the real curriculum time. So what captivity do schools have to do this? So how under the government's recent PSHE consultation, they believe that the curriculum for life should be afforded into the real curriculum. So it should be like part of the curriculum and part to everyone's day-to-day life, if you know. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I think that's the way it's got to go. We obviously have our dedicated PHSE curriculum delivered by key staff, but it's also needs to be in other curriculum lessons. So within maths, within English, within history, within geography. Now some of our teachers are already there; they're already delivering that within their lessons, but others need training and need resources and finance in order to upskill them to be able to deliver that. But we're committed to looking towards that, but we also like to have the dedicated time that it's currently given.
Okay, thank you. Nathan, there's a question.
You said earlier that you have specific teachers working on PSHE in your academy. And how much does your approach cost your academy, like as opposed to students' well-being and the community? But as well, are other schools going to be able to afford it cost-wise? Because it seems like quite a costly thing.
It is. The teachers that are dedicated to teaching at PHSE don't just teach PHSE, they're also teach modern foreign language. They're a team of highly skilled teachers. And they were the ones who put themselves forward to teach this part of the curriculum and have done the training to deliver that. Yes, it does have a financial implication, and in order to recruit the lead of PHSE, we'll have an even higher financial implication on the academy.
Yeah.
But we are committed to it. We believe it's important. We believe it's important for us. We believe it's important for our students. We believe it's important for the town. So we, alongside our sponsors, will support that.
Yeah. Throughout the day, we've been hearing that PSHE teachers and citizenship teachers are just teachers that have free spaces in their timetable. And you have kind of alluded to that, but does that mean that they are just purely doing it because they are the only ones available? Or are they actually going to be passionate about the subject?
They're passionate about the subject. And I don't know why it's worked out that they happen to be the teachers, and it may be that they have more time in their timetable. However, we do have other teachers in other areas that also teach PHSE. For instance, one of our geography teachers teaches PHSE and is also involved with our transition groups and involved with, so I said geography, it's a geography teacher, yeah. So we do have other teachers that are part of that too, but we would very much like more training and more resources in order to move that forward, to sort of upskill our current teachers who don't maybe add things into the curriculum as we would like them to.
So it's not a case of one subject suffering because a teacher is teaching two things? No. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We know Nikita, your question?
Based on your experience, how are teachers striking the balance between the core academia and life skills provision in schools? If I could start with Louisa, please.
I think really picking up on the previous comments we've just been talking about, the space in the timetable, the feedback that we often get is, yes, it is anyone who is light on timetable time who ends up teaching PSHE, which would suggest that that balance isn't kind of there at the moment. And I think there are other challenges around form teachers often end up being the ones who are delivering PSHE regardless of their kind of particular training and expertise. So topics then aren't kind of well delivered, or they're omitted entirely. And we've kind of had various comments from members around the variety of different ways that life skills can be delivered, and we're very clear that the overriding message is that it should be a discrete subject, but within a whole school approach that embeds life skills across the whole curriculum with the aim of promoting those life skills. And I think that's probably what you've heard throughout the day, that getting that balance is crucial. I don't think there's an easy answer at the moment to that, because we certainly feel that it is afforded a low status. It's the first thing to get squeezed in the timetable. It's most successful in cases where there is a PSHE coordinator who really is passionate about the subject and actively champion it, combined with kind of senior leadership support as well. So I think what can happen is that there's a lack of clarity over both those discrete lessons and the kind of cross-curricular links, and you end up with situations where you go down the route of having suspended timetable days which aren't delivered by specialists or teachers, where everyone's out of their comfort zone. Our experience from members is that doesn't tend to work very well. And another thing is that life skills tends to overlap kind of slightly uncomfortably with citizenship, and you get a mishmash of both, and those aren't kind of clearly defined. So I think I don't really have an easy solution at the moment, but that is a...
So to what extent do you think PSHE should stand alone as a subject in schools?
Well, as we said, we think it should be a discrete subject within schools, but it's not just about being taught something for an hour a week. It's got to be about those cross-curricular links, teaching it through other subjects, and looking at kind of the creative ways of doing that within a whole school approach that really has that ethos at its heart.
Thank you.
Thank you. Matt has a question.
Yes, you've spoken on a couple of occasions now about the sort of relative status of PSHE in the hierarchy of subjects. Do you believe that perhaps the first step forward is actually to make it a statutory subject?
Well, it's ATL does support that PSHE should be a statutory subject, and we were quite disappointed that that option has again been rejected recently, and also within that there doesn't seem to be any move at the moment to update a lot of the guidance around that, and that's something that absolutely needs to be happen. And I think whilst we in principle would welcome any reduction in prescription around the curriculum, we also believe that the framework absolutely needs to contain high quality PSHE education, sex and relationships education, careers and work related learning, and that's really back to a point I made earlier about entitlement for all, and that the only really way of addressing it being undervalued in the curriculum is to have that statutory status. So that's something that our members do support.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now moving on to Solomon.
Joyce,
did you want
Rochford might have wanted to quickly.
Sorry.
In Scotland, we do have dedicated time to PSC for every year group S1 to 6, and it is compulsory, and there has to be a rolling programme where we can actually see some development across the year groups. But we also have a framework which I've just brought with me, which we actually address through all the other subjects. But I think you do need that dedicated space, because you do have to deal with some quite difficult issues, and young people need that safe place where they can actually work together in a group around sexual health, AIDS and HIV, pregnancy, drug addiction, whatever it is that you're dealing with. Other subjects can deal with other stuff, but I think you have to have teachers that are comfortable teaching it, and we've actually taken our guidance teachers, who are the ones that do the pastoral stuff in schools, and in Edinburgh we've taken them out of teaching any other subject, so they're purely now, from the last year and a half, focused on PSE and developing really good programmes, and I think that's money well spent actually.
And just very briefly, yes, no. It has that in the short time that you've been doing it. Have you seen benefits from that? Has
Yes.
that been beneficial?
Because children, they're much more confident now, because they develop a really good, it can't be yes, no, they develop a really close relationship with one teacher, so they feel more confident about challenging the structures in the school, for example. Why are we doing this when we don't need to? Those sorts of things come out of that PSHE group, I think.
Thank you.
Sorry, well, Chair, Matt's very kindly asked my question. But if I sort of go on to, if I can ask you this, Amanda, and I will just make it known to the committee, my professional interest with Hastings Academy being part of their signing up to the pledge. However, because we were talking about, and I'll follow on from Matt's question, about PSHE being a sort of statutory requirement and subject, and Hastings Academy presented to us these subjects in the terms. So where key parts aren't taught at Hastings Academy, for example, political education, obviously academies, any school has a very squeezed curriculum in terms of time, and other schools will be wondering, so how do we incorporate political education? How are you incorporating things that aren't being taught in this?
Through enrichment, through partnership. We were very, we've been recently visited by the Secretary of State for Education, Michael Gove, who met with a group of students. They presented to him and he was very impressed. We've also had Baroness Fuchs from the House of Lords that came and spoke to a group of year 9, 10 and 11 students about her journey into politics. And after that we were very lucky enough to have 2 students who were given a guided tour of the House of Lords by Baroness Fuchs, so we were very lucky in that. And also we have our local MP, Amber Rudd, visits us on a regular basis, and always, and when she came to meet our new senior student body, she held a debate with them. Some really interesting questions were raised. So we do it through enrichment. It is a juggling act to find time within the curriculum. Quite often it happens, it will happen sort of, quite a lot of these opportunities happen after school, where it doesn't interfere with curriculum time. We as an academy, as every other school, are judged on our achievement and on our 5 A's to C's, including English and Maths. So we do have to make sure that taking students continually out doesn't impact on their qualifications.
Okay, and just with your permission, Chair, very briefly, if I can sort of go on from what I was originally going to ask, but turn it the other way and say, would each of the panel sort of have one very brief sentence of any disadvantages they may feel there might be in making PSHE a statutory requirement.
I can't see a disadvantage at all. Actually, I can't really.
Not me. We believe in it and we think it's important.
Similarly, can't see any particular disadvantage, but I think it'd be very important that you get the balance right between clear national expectations, which would hopefully improve the status of PSHE, but also still allowing enough freedom and flexibility for schools to facilitate and develop their own innovative practices.
Well, I know it's a brief.
Thank you. Now moving on to Pat.
We've already touched on some of the demographics surrounding the success of the Hastings Academy, but how are schools more broadly taking into account the specific needs of the local environment when applying these life skills?
I'm afraid I can't really answer that. I can only really answer on behalf of the Hastings Academy. Sorry.
I could say what we do in Edinburgh actually. Every school has a 16 plus group, and the 16 plus group is set up solely to make sure that everybody's going to move on to a positive destination, and that group consists of school guidance staff, senior leaders from the school, community workers, community learning and development, social work, careers, college if there's a college campus in that area, and anybody else who may actually be offering a post or a position for young people, not necessarily employers, but that group. And they will actually sit and discuss, what they need to do to actually put somebody in the right direction of a positive destination. And these groups meet every month. There's a lot of money goes into that, and it's working really well, actually.
And Louisa, you also spoke about the need for there to be sort of the flexibility on a local or even school by school level if PSHE was to be made statutory. How do you think schools implement that flexibility? Is that important to them?
I think it is important, but it's very hard to generalise, and obviously we represent a huge number of different schools, but I think in terms of the point of the local environment, and this is slightly off topic, but I think it's a very important point to make, that we've heard from some members that within their local authority area or city, PSHE teachers, primary secretary, have come together for regular network meetings, and they've been able to kind of share good practice, gather evidence of what's actually happening in their particular city, particular challenges that need tackling, might be around teenage pregnancy or quitting smoking. And through those kind of links, they're able to actually take a whole area approach across different schools. And I think opportunities like that are really valuable, because that's thinking beyond the school boundaries and actually very much embedded in the local authority and the local community. And I think what was quite disappointing when we were talking to a particular member about that, which she was saying, actually, as teachers, we're not often given time to go to those meetings anymore, because the focus is so much on league tables and the core subjects, and those kind of added extra things that are so beneficial are the first things to go. And I think that's something that does need looking at, because especially around if you are developing forms of PSHE provision locally, you need to have those links with other schools and those partnerships with other organisations and agencies in the area.
Thank you.
Thank you. Move on to Izzy.
Many people have realise that there are difficulties in delivering life skills, such as untrained teachers and having no space in this timetable, but probably primarily to Louisa, what would assist teachers to teach PSHE or citizenship, and ideally where would these resources come from?
Okay, well, this is something that I think our members have been most vocal about, because really strongly feel that you need fully trained, confident and competent teachers to best serve the needs of pupils in terms of teaching life skills. And at the moment, that is inconsistent. And I think the key points that people have made to us have really been around initial training and also ongoing support. And at the moment, from what we can gather, in initial training, PSHE is not always taught as part of initial teacher training courses. Ongoing CPD, continuing professional development, is rare. There are lots of things out there, but it's just not being accessed in a particularly consistent way at the moment. And I think the things that people have said in schools have been most useful is really kind of quite simple. It's often about having a database of accredited external professionals and agencies, both at a local, national level, that they can work with. It could be about different having your access to different resources from a whole range of national associations, local associations, kind of good guidance and practice and materials. So it's very practically focused, and also those resources need to respond to kind of changing times and be up to date and reflective of kind of new challenges that teachers are having to teach in the classroom. So I think it's those, it's that initial teacher training, but also kind of the ongoing and sharing that continues. And I think one of the things that our members are quite concerned about, and that we are as a union, that there's now a variety of different routes into teaching, so you've got quite a fragmented system, so that actually means it might be harder to support and train new teachers in PSHE, and you really need to make sure within those different systems that it doesn't diminish in importance and risk getting lost completely. So those are some of the things that we've been thinking about with our members.
Thank you.
Okay, Daniel has a... Oh, do you want to ask a follow-up?
So I was just going to ask Joyce, because I don't know, where are, in response to the resources question, where do the resources come from for the curriculum for excellence, and is it successful where they come from? Is it working?
I think there are lots of different funding streams actually. Somebody asked me that the other day. The Scottish Government actually funds an awful lot of stuff in terms of getting young people into employment training. The City of Edinburgh itself, we fund an awful lot of stuff as well, linked to our Edinburgh Guarantee. And the Edinburgh Guarantee, its mission statement is every young person in Edinburgh will go into a positive destination. So they put a tremendous amount of money into schools to allow them to actually do work around that sort of thing. If I give you an example of one of the things we're funding or helping to fund is career academies, not the academies you have in England. Schools nominated a group of 10 people, and those group of 10 people did a 2-year careers academy as part of their normal timetabled week. And what Careers Academy means is that they have actual access to leaders of industry who will actually come into the school, and the whole group from across the authority will meet together, and they do lots of workshops and lots of leadership type things and various things that really stretch young people. So it gives them an idea of who they are. It's not about working in their industry, because this happens quite a lot across the 2 years. And in the middle of the 2 years during the summer holidays, the young people have a paid internship at one of the businesses. And that tends to be law, finance, creative industries, because that's the main employers in Edinburgh. So we've put money into that, but so are the employers as well, because we have really good links to their employers, because they realise that we need to create the type of young people that can fill the posts of the future. And if we just leave it to chance, it's not going to happen. So we need people to actually work with us. So in a way, there's lots of different funding streams, but it's European funding as well, I have to say, because a lot of our areas are areas of multiple deprivation. The area that I'm a head teacher and deputy head teacher in is one of those areas, so we get a tremendous amount of funding for that. And that helps us work with our community groups and employ youth workers to work with young people. So I think Scots are quite good at finding money, actually.
So move on to Daniel now.
Thank you. Joyce will correct me if I'm wrong, but the new qualification in Scotland, National 4, isn't it? It will be internally assessed only, and then obviously heavily moderated in the back of that.
Yep.
Do you think internal assessments instead of external exams, which are sent away, is maybe a way to go forward for curriculum of life?
That's a hot potato, isn't it?
Yes, panel, yeah.
I don't know really. I think there's a place for both really. I took the boys' view that sitting an hour-long exam doesn't necessarily show all your worth, but even the exams that are externally assessed in Scotland still have an internal element which you must pass in order to get accredited with the final. Yeah, it's not called NABS anymore, but there's something there as an added value unit which actually allows you to add breadth and depth to your learning. So I think NABS became a bit, you just jump through the hoops, then you sit the exam. What we're trying to do now is to give young people an opportunity to take the learning they've got and actually do a project or something that shows that they've actually been able to apply it in a sort of a much more complex way. And that's embedded in all the exams now. So there's still an element of that, in not necessarily internal assessment, but an internal thing you must do. I'm not sure. I think if exams are at a fairly low level, it's probably better doing it as continuous assessment. Because I think the type of young people that are likely to be sitting those exams are going to perform better when they're able to do it in little chunks. They're not going to go into university anyway, are they? Let's face it. The people that are going to go into university can sit 3-hour exams and pass them with A's or whatever it is. That's not the problem. The problem is you have to have an exam structure that can address all needs. And the needs of quite a lot of people is that they can do things in that other way. So I'm not sure I'd just go for one or the other. I think you've got to blend it. And I think blended learning is the way. Yeah. It really is, actually.
Okay, and we'll move on to Kerry now.
We've already briefly touched on it. One of the
things Ofsted mentioned earlier on in an earlier panel was about the difference in teaching styles and the quality of teaching depending on the school. How do you think there can be an effective sharing of good practice, not just on a local means, but on perhaps a more national level?
Well, we're certainly happy to share any good practice that's happening and being rolled out at the academy. And we have good links with our partner schools, both our primary schools and our partner secondary schools, which are going to become academies. I believe they're going to be ARC academies. So we already have partnership and we already share good practice between ourselves. The heads do meet on a regular basis and did so today. On a national level, I'm unable to comment.
I don't feel I can say a huge amount about this, but I would say on a national level, organisations such as the PSHE Association, who I know you heard from earlier, would be obviously someone who'd be a good place to help share and disseminate good practice, and already do. And I know Ofsted themselves already on their PSHE page have lots of case studies and examples. But I suppose the challenge is that information is there, but is it necessarily getting out to teachers at the moment in a consistent way? So that's something that I think would need looking at further, and who's best placed to get that information out.
Nationally, we have Education Scotland, who do write all our national guidance documents, and when we are inspected, not by Ofsted, it's by Her Majesty's Inspectors of Education, that advice and those frameworks of what they're actually measuring our progress against, so they kind of go together. I think it's hard to question nationally how effective it is. You know, we would hope that we're all in the same documents, and as Curriculum for Excellence hasn't actually gone right through to the top of the school now into 6th year, we're still in 4th year, we're doing it year by year. We won't know until everybody's doing every aspect of it, so there's some bits still not being assessed by the HMIE inspectors, because they can't actually do that at the moment. So whether the national advice and guidance is exactly correct or not, I don't know. I hope it is. Take that bit out of the tape if
Matt has a question.
You mentioned the advice and guidance that's made available through associations like the PSHE Association, who we heard from earlier, but that you're not sure whether that information gets to teachers on the front line necessarily. Who would you say the onus is with then to actually make sure that happens, to make sure that teachers do read that and use those examples of good practice?
Of all sides, really. It is the associations themselves and the national bodies. It's teachers as well, kind of taking some initiatives to access those as well, curriculum coordinators within schools interpreting and disseminating it down. We also play a role as a trade union in trying to share good practice as well and get information out there. But I think, you know, when we did survey members on kind of which resources they did use, they did repeatedly say that they found the PSHE Association resources particularly helpful, alongside a whole range of other things. But that obviously does have recognition amongst teachers. But I just think it's very hard to judge what the reach is, isn't it? So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you all for your answers today. I would like to ask if there are any points you would like to say which you haven't already said, and if there's any recommendations that you would like to see in our report. If any of you would like to say anything further.
I would say that if someone was looking at the education system again, I think that having grand ideals makes it very, very difficult to actually see it translating down into real life practice. And I was thinking when one of the panel members mentioned global citizenship, I thought, what is global citizenship? I couldn't define that actually. So I think that maybe that, you know, if I was advising someone, I'd say that it has to be much more understandable for young people. To call someone a global citizen is quite difficult, but if you say a responsible citizen, it gives you an idea of them being involved and engaging in a positive way with something that's happening in their school, workplace, club, community, whatever. So it's about, so I suppose what it is, it's about language, it's about the semantics of how you describe whatever it is you want someone to do. It has to be kind of have a practical application rather than just being ethereal and somewhere beyond somebody's ken, I think. You understand that word, and beyond their know.
I would really like to stress the importance of partnership. Without a shadow of doubt, it makes a huge difference to us. The partnerships we've forged with our local community, with our business community, with the Chamber of Commerce, with our local Hastings Voluntary Action, and with our parents. That is how we bring life skills and into the academy, and it opens doors, it offers new opportunities. Most definitely, it's made a difference to us, and we feel it's really important partnership.
Okay.
There was something that one of our members said to us that really resonated with me around the teaching of PSHE, and she said it's about teaching children and young people to make choices, and information alone does not change attitudes and behaviour. And I think that really kind of, for me, encapsulates the importance of this whole agenda, and the fact that we know there are large variations in the quality of PSHE education in schools at the moment. We absolutely should be aiming for this to be a standalone statutory subject that's taught by trained and well-supported teachers. So for me, I suppose in terms of the outcomes for this review, it is looking at those training issues for teachers in particular, and getting that entitlement to PSHE training both in their initial training stage and that ongoing support, continual professional development, updating of resources. And those are the issues that I think are most important.
I'd like to thank the witnesses again for their time today. I'd like to thank everyone who came to watch and all the witnesses all day. I'd also like to thank the committee. So that concludes our first day of evidence. Order.